Okay, so last topic for our test 2 is immunological disorders. So we're going to look at the similarities and differences between hypersensitivities, autoimmune disease, and immunodeficiency. So hyper means what? A lot, right? So a response, or even a response at all, right? That's can be a problem for us. Typically what people refer to hypersensitivities as, for the most part, especially for the first one, is allergy, right? So this is a response of the immune system to something that wouldn't actually harm us. So we're oversensitive, right, to something that we don't need to actually be sensitive to. Auto means what? Self. So autoimmune disease is where the immune system is attacking self, right? And remember, we're supposed to know the difference between self and non-self, right? But that isn't always the case, right? Sometimes the body recognizes itself and thinks it's foreign. And that's how we get autoimmune disease. Immunodeficiency, if you're deficient, it means the immune system is not what? It's not working, right? So it's not functioning well. There is a virus, right, that most of us are aware of that can debilitate your immune system, known as HIV. It stands for human immunodeficiency virus. But there are other ways in which your immune system can become deficient, right? And all of these are harmful in one way or another, especially autoimmune, when we're attacking ourselves. Being deficient, we don't have any protection. If you're overly sensitive, you're responding more so than you need to, you're not spending your resources appropriately, you could say. So these are all similar in that they're problems, right? They're disorders. They're not good situations. They're different in the specific action, why this is happening. So when it comes to hypersensitivities, there's 4 different ones, and they number them. But I don't want you guys necessarily memorizing the numbers. We'll stick to the whole title. So type 1 hypersensitivity is actually known as immediate IgE mediated. And in that name, it tells you a lot about what's going on. Immediate meaning this is a very fast response. IgE referring to that particular class of antibody that's involved in this response. And these are the ones that people typically refer to as allergic reactions. So we're going to talk about 4 specific examples of these types of hypersensitivities. In order to be sensitive, IgE has to be produced, that particular class of antibody. So once you're exposed the first time, you're said to be sensitized, which means that now you're producing IgEs. The allergic reaction actually happens the second time you're exposed sometimes, because again, the IgEs have got to be produced first. You have to be sensitized first. So same process that we talked about before about making antibodies, right? A dendritic cell would probably engulf it. It would present it on MHC class what in order to get antibodies? 2, right? And which T cell is it going to talk to? The helper T cell. And then the helper T cell is going to help out who actually makes the antibodies? The B cells, right? And what do we call the B cells when they differentiate into ones that actually secrete antibodies? Plasma cells, right? So that's the steps of sensitization, right? The same thing that happens most of the time, the first time our primary response, right? We're going to be exposed to it, right? Those cells are going to become activated. And in this case, too, that helper T cell is going to tell that B cell to make this particular class of antibody, IgE. Now, this tendency to produce this particular class of antibody under these circumstances tends to be inherited, right? So Of course, this number probably isn't even accurate anymore. The minute they publish our textbooks, right, they're inaccurate. I don't know what the percentage they have in your book right now. But this number is going up and up because think about this, right? If it's inherited, the more people with allergies, the more offspring we're going to have with allergies, right? So for me, for instance, right, I have allergies. I got them from my mom. And I pass them, unfortunately, on to my son, right? There is the potential that he will pass them on to his children if he has children. Peanut allergy, right? You used to never really hear about peanut allergy, right? This was, of course, before social media, too, right? But the instance has gone up of peanut allergies. Why? What did I just say? It's inherited, right? It's inherited. So in the past, what would happen if someone didn't know they had a peanut allergy, ate peanuts, right, didn't get help quick enough, they died, right? So they definitely didn't grow up and have children that they could pass this genetic information on to, correct? Right? Now that we know about it, we can prevent someone from dying from something like an allergic reaction, but they pass on that allergy potentially to their children. Not always, right? And then there are some where the parents don't even have an allergy, right? And the children have developed that allergy. There's two different types of reactions that can happen. You can have a local reaction, right, which is the case that I run into with hay fever, right, being allergic to most of the grasses and pollens that we have, right, and inhaling those, you end up with a stuffy nose, right? You might have itchy, runny eyes. You might even have it where it affects your lungs, right? We refer to that as asthma. But when you ingest something, right, when you're allergic to a food or something is injected into you, right, like a drug, right, that you might be allergic to, or in the case of some venomous insects that bite you, that sometimes they can inject that venom into your bloodstream, right? And therefore, that could go system-wide, right? When you ingest something, your food goes into your bloodstream, right? It could spread throughout your entire body. When something gets injected into you, right, it could go into your bloodstream and go throughout your entire body. That's referred to as generalized anaphylaxis, right? Instead of happening locally, it can happen widespread. That's the most damaging and potentially lethal because of this ability to go system-wide. You still have a question? Some foods can be, yeah, an antigen is something that, what? Is foreign to your body and you mount an immunological response, right? We refer to allergens, right, as that because the immunological response is one that's not necessarily needed, right? But it is technically an antigen, right? It is something foreign to your body that your body is responding to. Good question. Thank you. Does that make sense to you guys? So it's the same process, right? It's the same way we respond to foreign things. Unfortunately, is pollen going to harm you? No, peanut butter shouldn't harm you. Penicillin shouldn't harm you. It should help you, right? But unfortunately, your body is recognizing it as foreign and responding to it as if it was something that would hurt you. The unfortunate thing is it's not something that's going to hurt you. Now, what's our most common immunological response to something foreign? Well, how are we going to respond? What's going to happen? Right, and why is that? Why do you have hives? Why do you have itching? It's an inflammatory response, right? Whenever we activate our immune system, right, inflammation, influx of those white blood cells to fight in that particular area. So in the case of IgE, right, it's already attached. So once you become sensitized and you make IgE, right, so we go through the process, right, presenting to the helper T cell, activating those B cells turn into plasma cells and they secrete IgE. And this is the bad news with this one. This is what it does. It coats mast cells, right? And these antibodies will stay for weeks attached to the mast cells. So for sensitized individuals like myself, literally within seconds of inhaling, an allergen, it binds to these antibodies already attached to the mast cells, and the mast cells immediately release their chemical mediators like histamine, right? What kind of response do we get? Inflammatory response, right? So there it's binding, right? And this is the second time you're exposed, right? After these antibodies have already been produced. So when you were sensitized, you didn't even know it happened, right? You know it when you get that second exposure and you get the release of these mediators. So you get things like capillary dilation, which is a component of inflammation, right? In the case of airways, they'll become constricted, right? They're trying to stop the stuff from getting in. Well, the problem is you still need to breathe, don't you? Yeah, just a little bit. It's kind of necessary for life, right? And that's what can be so scary for asthmatics too, right? Is that you actually have to breathe, right? And where your immune system is causing you to make it more difficult to breathe. Mucus secretion increases because what are we trying to do? We're trying to trap and move it out of our body, right? In the case of your nose, literally out of your body, right? In the case of the mucus in your respiratory tract and all of that, it's going to be heading up and then down into your stomach. Same thing for your nose, right? It drips down the back of your throat as well, right? To try and get it to the digestive system to be cleared out of the body that way. Pain, again, if you have inflammation, you have swelling in that area, it's going to activate those pain receptors. Itching is sometimes a response as well, right? To this particular activation, it has to do with the mediators that these mast cells and basophils will release, right? That's why it's a little bit different response than you will have. Although itching isn't specifically necessarily mean that it's a allergic response. You can get itching even when you have just a normal healing event going on, right? Itching is a strange symptom. You can get it, but usually, especially when you have an allergic type response, it's probably a pretty good indicator of this activation scheme going on where you're having IgE. So as I said, I have really bad hay fever, right? So I always tell my students, remember E for Erica. Erica hates IgE, right? This is the one that mediates my allergic reactions that I have. So had I known I was going to become a teacher when I was going through my allergy testing, I probably would have took pictures. This is someone else's pictures. But when they're testing to see what you're allergic to, they'll inject into your forearms. They'll scrape and inject into your skin particular known potential allergens for you to figure out exactly what you're allergic to. So when I was going through to try and figure out why I was always stuffing up, they did this on me. And this is very mild considering compared to the reaction that I had. So again, it's an inflammatory response. So you see the redness, right? And they refer to that as a flare, right? And you'll even see the puffiness sometimes. They refer to that as the wheal. But this is very common as to a skin reaction in response to an allergen. So this is also what you see with hives. Now hives can be caused by two different things. It can be caused by coming in contact with something, with your skin itself, like in the case of doing allergy testing, or if you ingest something, because remember, when you ingest something, it goes into your bloodstream, your skin gets fed by that bloodstream, right? So then you could have that reaction happen in that skin in response to something you ingested. In that case, though, usually what part of your body actually gets the hives first if it's something you ingested? Your stomach. And again, that's the first skin, right, that gets the blood supply from things that you eat, right? But then it can even spread, up the body and throughout. But that's usually a pretty strong indicator it's something you ingested as opposed to something you came in contact with. Unlike me, I'm allergic to poison oak, when I was in California, we went and played paintball. And I laid down in poison oak. Didn't realize it. Had it all over my stomach. Several weeks of steroids to get rid of that. That was great. Fun. When they did this testing for me, my arm swelled up so bad on this side I couldn't wear my watch for a week and had to take steroids afterwards to quiet down the inflammation from the allergy testing. So at the time, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. So, I had a house full of animals. And so this arm, they tested all the animal danders and stuff on it. And I was saying, if you puff up, I'm just going to cut you off, arm. Instead, it was all the outside stuff, right? The arm over here was going nuts. And thankfully, not allergic to anything that I eat. They tested all of that on my back. I didn't see it, but it didn't puff up, right? It was this arm. Things like thistle and ragweed. Thistle was the worst for me. And so I went through some therapy we're going to talk about next, desensitization, to try and lessen my reaction to some of these things. So hay fever, right, is what a lot of people unfortunately experience, right? Inhaling these pollens and things and getting the reaction in their nose and their eyes. Unfortunately, for some people, inhaling and making it to the lungs, right, can result in asthma. But this can also happen for people, again, think about this, they can also ingest stuff and have an asthmatic reaction. Because, again, the blood goes to eventually your lungs, right? And if that blood is carrying those allergens to that tissue, you can have an allergic reaction there as well. And it has to do with the mediators that are there in the lungs to why you get these different responses. So these aren't so bad. These are mostly localized, right? On your skin for hives, right? Hay fever, your nose and your eyes. Asthma, your lungs, which can be quite threatening. Generalized, although rare, is much more serious. Right? And this is the problem where it gets into the bloodstream, right? And it's traveling system-wide. In this case, remember, inflammation. With inflammation, you're going to have dilation of blood vessels. With that, you get a decrease also in blood flow and blood pressure. If this is happening throughout your entire body, that's more than your system can handle. So you ever experience a drop in water pressure, right? It just dribbles out of the shower. Well, imagine that happening in your body, where blood isn't getting to where it needs to go, right? You've just got to dribble. Your brain is not getting blood. Your vital organs, your heart and things, are not getting enough blood supply. When that happens, this is referred to as shock. When we know it's happening because of an allergic reaction, it's referred to as anaphylactic shock. They don't always necessarily know why someone is going into shock, right? But most of the time, it's a blood volume pressure issue, right? So a lot of times they're going to administer fluids, right, to get that blood volume up and then try and get at the root cause, right? Even emotion, right, can cause you to go into shock, right? And a really serious emotional situation. I was in a car accident once, and I was talking crazy. My husband was like, "What is wrong with her?" And the ambulance guy's like, "Oh, she's just in shock." It's like, like my brain wasn't getting enough, oxygen and whatnot, so I wasn't making any sense, right? I wasn't making any sense because I was pretty freaked out, right? So, massive release of those mediators, right? Those blood vessels dilate, and you may have fluid loss. So this can cause serious problems, right? If not rectified soon enough. Now, of course, the ambulance guy was like, "Oh, she's just in shock," and didn't freak out because he knew it was an emotional type of shock. And once the adrenaline and all that stuff calmed down for me, that I would be fine because I didn't have any injuries, right, from it. The car flipped around and spun around, right? But fortunately, I just banged my elbow, right? But emotionally, I was pretty shook up. So that took a little bit of time to calm down. in my system to get back online. Not necessarily the case with people who have ingested something, right, or got stung by a bee or something like that. What do they usually carry around with them that's going to help alleviate this problem? An EpiPen, and that's epinephrine, right? So that's going to increase heart rate, and it'll constrict blood vessels, right? And this will help get the perfusion of the blood. But anytime that they do that, that's a temporary fix, right? They still got to go to the hospital, right? And I'll warn you guys too, apparently some dentists, when they give you the Novocaine to numb you, it may contain a little bit of epinephrine, apparently. One time I was at the dentist and I'm sitting there and my heart is just pounding out of my chest. I said, something is wrong. You know, I said, something's just not right. And she's like, oh no, the Novocaine has a little bit of epinephrine in it, so it'll speed it up and it'll numb you faster. I was like, you might want to warn somebody ahead of time. Right? Apparently I'm very sensitive to epinephrine because I felt like my heart was going to come right out of my chest, literally. Right? I was pretty freaked out about having dental work done, period, but I was pretty sure that was more than just me being freaked out, right? And it really was. It was because I'd been given epinephrine, didn't know it. So one of the therapies for people who are allergic and have severe allergies is to try to desensitize them, right? So they had made up a special cocktail specifically for me against the things that I was allergic to. And instead of me inhaling them, they would inject it. And by entering it into my body in a different route, it would try and stimulate my body to switch antibody production to IgGs instead of IgE. The benefit of that is that the IgEs will clear out the allergen instead of it coming in contact with the IgEs that are on the surface of the mast cells. So we get a different type of response, right? We get them cleared out. We don't get this activation of the mast cells and basophils. This is referred to as desensitization. So I think it completely got rid of my thistle allergy, thank goodness. Not so much my ragweed. I wasn't able to continue all the way through the therapy because I moved to a different part of the country. And I was inflamed all the time, so they couldn't do my allergy shots because I was having allergy. It was horrible. We were there for the military. I was never so glad to go back home. I was like, I can't live here. I can't live here full time. The grasses are like all the time. It was in Northern California. It was horrible. I definitely could not live there full time. So a lot of people go through this desensitization, and some people have actually kind of started doing this a little bit on their own. One of the natural ways of desensitizing yourself to pollens is to eat local honey, right? So I take a tablespoon of local honey each morning, right? And again, this is to try and get my body exposed to it in a different way, so it'll make a different class of antibodies, IgGs or maybe even IgAs. So they're interacting with the allergens that I'm inhaling instead of the IgEs that are going to cause this allergic reaction. So, and this is also why I said that I suggest that you do the mist for the vaccine for the flu, because again, it's a different administration into your body, and so therefore a different immunological response, right, and potentially a more protective one. So how these even enter into your body determines how your body responds. But also genetically, some people are more predisposed that when you're exposed to certain things, that you're producing these IgEs, right? We're not going to talk about this particular type of therapy. I haven't done more. I want to do some more research on it, see if anyone's actually using it. They talk about it in your book, but if I don't know of it actually being in use, there's no point in talking about it, right? Yeah. Yeah, we're not going to cover that one. Okay. So for IgE hypersensitivities, right, the problem is these IgEs that are produced, right? When someone becomes sensitized, right? When you're first exposed, you make these IgEs, and each time after this, y'all, you make more and more, right? And this is why for some people, allergic reactions, the more often it happens, the more aggressive the response is, just like it is with our other things, because again, you get memory built up to this, right? So this is this same response we've talked about before of producing antibodies. You still get those memory cells too. And those get activated each time, in addition to the IgEs on the mast cells getting activated. It's a mess. For cytotoxic hypersensitivities, we found out about this reaction when we started trying to do blood transfusions, and when we discovered the disease, hemolytic disease in the newborn. So again, this one is mediated by antibodies, but different antibodies. It's not IgEs, it's IgMs and IgG. So remember that when antibodies bind, especially when you're talking about IgGs and IgM, they can interact with the components and cells of our immune system and cause particular reactions to happen. So both IgM and IgG can interact with complement and activate it via what we call the classical pathway. What do you get when activation of complement happens? What's the most common immunological response? You get opsonization with C3b, right, which is going to help the phagocytes recognize and destroy it. What else do you get because of C3a and C5a? Most common immunological response. Inflammation. Remember we started out the whole immunology unit with inflammation? There was a reason for that. I was trying to drive it home, right? Inflammation. Right? You're going to get the influx of the white blood cells there. So the ones that are opsonized with the C3b are going to be engulfed, right? And then what else could potentially form? What does MAC stand for? Membrane complex attack, right? Altogether, we might all get it. Membrane attack complex, right? That's a group of proteins that inserts into the membrane like a donut shape, right? And is going to poke holes in it. So imagine you get red blood cells from somebody else. They don't make sure it's the right match, right? And so some of the proteins and sugars on the surface of that red blood cell, your immune system recognizes as being foreign. Uh-oh, attack, right? So if IgM or IgG binds, it could activate complement, right? You get that inflammation. You get more binding so that, that phagocytic cells eat it. But in the case of human cells, C3b doesn't bind, right? So you're okay with that. But you're going to still get MAC complex formation, right? You're still going to get inflammation, neutrophils into the area. This is happening in your bloodstream. Is this what you want to happen when you get a blood transfusion? Absolutely not. They gave you those red blood cells because you need them to do something for you, right? Like carry oxygen, right? If they're being destroyed by your immune system, we've got a twofold problem. You're not getting what you needed, why they gave you the red blood cells, and you're even destroying them. That's creating a big old mess, right? You'll get nauseous. You might even vomit. If it's what class of antibody, if it binds to those red blood cells and a natural killer cell comes along and it's going to kill it, we call this antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity. There's only one class of antibody, though, that does this. IgG. And this will help you remember it too, because this is also what happens with hemolytic disease of the newborn. Because what antibody can cross the placenta? Just IgG. Just IgG. So the baby, right, red blood cells have the antigen. The mom doesn't have the antigen. The mom may have been exposed to positive blood, right, made those antibodies so that now those antibodies are crossing the placenta and attacking the baby's red blood cells, right? One of the things that will happen is complement activation. The other thing that can happen because it's IgG is this antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity where natural killer cells are going to destroy those red blood cells. So the two examples that fall into this category of cytotoxic are hemolytic disease in the newborn and blood transfusions. Now, when it comes to blood transfusions, the ABO blood group is the one that's the most common, everyone has this. You either have or don't have these antigens in this blood group. If you have A-type blood, you have the A antigen on the surface of red blood cells. If you have B-type blood, you have the B. If you're AB, you have both A and B, because remember, you have a mom and a dad. Both of them give you genetic information, right? And these are two different alleles within our population, so you could have both. If you're O like me, I didn't get either A or B from either one of my parents, right? I don't have either one of those antigens on the surface of my red blood cells, right? That's good for me giving my blood to other people, right? Because it's basically naked, right? It's not going to cause a reaction. Even if they have antibodies, it's not going to attack those red blood cells. They're naked, right? But if somebody gives me A-type blood, I'm going to have some problems, right? Because I don't have that antigen. And the strange thing with ABO blood group, there are bacteria and stuff out there you get exposed to naturally that you produce IgM, right? That particular class of antibody, that big one too. So even though you've probably never been given a blood transfusion previously in your life, if they go to give you one and they give you the wrong one in this blood group, you will probably have a reaction because you already have these IgMs in your system that would attack anything foreign from you. So in the case for me, you can't give me A or B, or A and B would be just not pretty, right? I have to get O only, right? Because I potentially have anti-A and anti-B IgMs that would attack. And so I'm going to activate complement. But am I going to do antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity with natural killer cells for that? What class of antibody you need for that? IgG, right? So for IgM, for ABO blood group, you're just going to get activated complement, right? And, you know, the normal cross-linking that happens, opsonization where neutrophils and macrophages are going to gobble up and destroy those red blood cells. Make sense? And this is why between you and your baby, you don't have to worry about ABO, right? Those antibodies are not crossing the placenta. They're too big, okay, for that blood group antigen. But there's lots of different antigens we have on the surface of our red blood cells. That's one of the most common that we worry about, right, being compatible with someone else. As far as RH goes, that one you actually have to be exposed to that specific antigen in order to produce the antibodies. And in that case, though, you produce IgG. And this is why it creates problems for moms. Because if mom is negative, means she doesn't have that RH antigen, if she gets exposed to positive blood, she'll make that antibody. If she's making or has that antibody and she's pregnant, it could cross the placenta and attack the baby's red blood cells. You get antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity. You get the baby's own natural killer cells killing its own red blood cells because of mom's anti-IgG, RH antibodies and complement activation. So how do we get exposed as a woman to positive blood? There's several ways. Someone could give you a blood transfusion, right? Somebody screw up and give you positive blood. If you're a negative person, you're now going to make these antibodies, right? Great. Not so good. If you are pregnant, during pregnancy, because of the placenta and the way it's set up, your blood and your baby's blood does not mix during pregnancy, normally, unless there's damage to the placenta, right? In that case, mixing can happen. If you have a miscarriage, depending on what stage of pregnancy, again, baby blood could mix with mommy blood. When you give birth to the baby first, then the placenta, right? Placenta's not as hard as the baby. But It comes out too. And that disconnection that happens, baby's blood and mommy's blood can happen, right, at that disconnect. Doesn't affect the baby because baby came out first, right, then placenta. But then mom could potentially produce those antibodies. So we give anti-RH antibodies to RH negative mothers to help prevent this from happening, right? And for some that have been exposed, they have to get this treatment throughout their pregnancy. So Dr. LeBlanc, he'll tell you, his wife is RH negative, and they have 3 kids, right? By the 3rd kid, I forget how often she had to go for therapy to make sure that her antibodies weren't crossing the placenta and getting to the baby. And I'm not sure exactly what the therapy they do for someone who's already been, but that's anti-RH antibodies. So maybe it's against the particular antibodies. I don't know. I can't, I thought it was just antibodies against the red blood cells, but it might be against the antibodies themselves. They gave you another one, yeah. Yeah. And that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to prevent you from making antibodies or your antibodies getting to the baby. Does that make sense? Right? So, I'm not going to go over the next one until next time. But again, antibodies. So immune complex mediated. And I highly suggest watching those animations, right? They're on the animations page as well as they're embedded in my PowerPoint. We'll go over the next 2 hypersensitivities on Wednesday. Remember, no classes Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday because of fall holiday this week. And I don't forget I did posted the adaptive assignment on Connect, so be studying up on that.